Good evening all, and welcome. Having someone follow you isn't fun. Creeping up on you, invading your privacy, stalking, as you're about to find out. So get comfortable, and let the darkness take control. When I was in high school, probably around 9th or 10th grade, my best friend had a boyfriend that was older and lived fairly far away, so he was not from our school or anything. Not sure how they met. When we would spend the night at my house, or we would go to the mall or to see a movie, he would often stalk us. We would be in my house, and he would drive by slowly. Keep in mind he lived nowhere near there, so it was no accident. This was while they were dating. I think he wanted to check up to make sure she wasn't cheating or something. He would look to see if my car was at my house, etc. One time we were at an amusement park that was local and he just happened to show up there. My friend, bless her heart, was kind of dumb and naive, so she honestly thought it was some happy accident he showed up there while we were there. Obviously, I knew this was intentional. It was pretty annoying that she and I could do nothing without him showing up or following us. I used to talk to him, and he told me he wanted to poke holes in their contraception so that he could get her pregnant so she wouldn't leave him. I told her what he said, and she still carried on sleeping with him. Finally, she got some sense and decided she wanted to break up. Well, that did not go well. She had a grandmother and was elderly, in the early stages of dementia at the time. Lived alone, but only a few minutes from my friend so they could keep an eye on her and take care of her. Well, apparently, the crazy boyfriend began visiting the elderly grandmother regularly on his own. No one knew he was doing this, since she was just a confused old woman. He was saying all kinds of things to her to try and manipulate her. It worked to the point that the grandmother thought he was a great guy and that my friend and her mum and stepdad were awful for treating him badly. The grandmother had some kind of episode where she was yelling at my friend's parents about everything. It got to the point where they had to take out a restraining order so that the guy could no longer approach her or the grandmother. I'm not a scaredy cat, but I was getting a little nervous myself because he did know where I lived, and he knew I was probably one of the ones encouraging her to break up with him, and I worried he may retaliate. But lucky for everyone involved, he took the hint and stayed away. But that is truly a shady tactic to manipulate an innocent old woman with dementia into turning her own daughter and granddaughter and confusing the poor old woman. What a piece of work. I worked at a local pizza joint in my small hometown back in 2016. About 6 months into the job, I had an older man around 70 years old come in. He walked up to the counter and had asked me for a soda. He then sat at a table. A few minutes later, he came back up to the counter and asked what my name was. I told him, as we didn't have name tags. I didn't think anything of it, and he walked back down to the table to sit down. 10 minutes go by and he came back up to the counter and said, "What would you say if I were to ask you on a date?" Immediately I got a bad feeling. I uncomfortably laughed it off and told him no. He then left. A few hours later I saw him walking back up to the pizza place. I told my co-worker that I was uncomfortable and that I didn't want to serve him. She agreed with me and I hid in the back while she spoke with him. After a few minutes, I came back and she told me what happened. She said he asked for me, and she told him that no one named Courtney works here. And then he said, yes she does, she's 5'3", has purple hair, and she's off on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I'd never seen this guy before, but somehow he knew my work schedule. I immediately called my dad. He's an officer, and I wanted to see what I could do. There wasn't anything I could do but avoid him whenever I was working. I had to let everyone know the situation and how uncomfortable I was. However, when he came in, they forced me to handle him. The next time he came in, he was telling me about his 18-year-old girlfriend in the Philippines. He then went to the restroom and was banging around in there for at least an hour. And then he just left. I would occasionally look out the window to see what was going on outside, and I would see him in his car with a newspaper in front of his face, watching me. Everyone would tell him to leave me alone, and that I was only 18. He didn't care. He would follow me around the grocery store, which was right next to the pizza place. I got used to all of this. Eventually, he put in a job application at the pizza place. I read the resume. In the experience section, there were a few normal things. However, the last few things sent shivers down my spine. He had listed janitorial experience and chainsaw experience. My coworkers and boss thought this was hilarious, so they put it on the wall, and whenever I couldn't perform up to their standards, they said they'd give him a call and give him the job. I soon left after that, so I'm not sure if he continued to try and chat with the other girls. A few months later, I started working at a rescue center. I was talking to a few co-workers and they brought this guy up. The exact same thing happened to one of them at the previous jobs. Some 70-year-old stalker. Creepy. I'm a female volunteer for the fire department, and this happened a few years back when I was 20. During our drills at my former department, our bay doors are open, so people have been known to walk in and talk to us and ask questions or just look at the trucks. One evening, this 23-year-old dude strolls by, a fellow firefighter from another town, which isn't uncommon. Firemen stop by other departments all the time when in town. He made his rounds and was talking to my chief, my captain, and the young guys, and he made his way over to me and started chatting me up. He was a nice guy, good looking, and we exchanged Snapchats. It didn't take us long to figure out that he was a psycho. A week after talking with me, he messages me. "So how come you didn't swipe right?" Confused, I asked him what he meant, and then this unfolded. He told me all of this in an attempt to impress me with how devoted he was. He found me on a dating app, used my profile picture from the dating app to find my Facebook, since in one of my Facebook pictures I'm wearing a uniform that had my last name. Definitely my bad. He then used my profile picture to find out what fire department I was on by looking closely at the fire truck in the background. He told me he walked by my fire department almost every day to see when we drilled and to spot me, and that he's telling me this. I'm confused as heck, and he then goes, "I'm having a pretty rough day. Can I come over?" Cue to him telling me he's on his way. He used my Snapchat location to find my work and house. My location now is off on everything. When he arrived, he brought a love letter and gifts. He said he was sorry and confused and just really wanted things to work out. I told him that he needed to leave and never speak to me again, to which he obliged by leaving, saying if that would make me happy. He then made 3 to 4 new Snapchat and Facebook profiles in an attempt to add me back. At one point he got clever and made his Snapchat username Chris Smith 1990, which made me go, "Hey, it's my friend Chris Smith." Lo and behold, it isn't. Once I realized it wasn't my friend, but instead the psycho, he asked what I could do to make it up. I texted get lost and to set himself on fire, and then I got a video of him walking into the woods, and then he did that. He flicked a lighter over his hand, and I thought, haha, yeah. Then his entire hand and arm lit up, followed by screaming, and it cut out. I started to freak out thinking, oh crap, and immediately got a photo of the hairs on his knuckles and arms burnt off and his burnt shirt. He was okay and was coated in something flammable, but something that wouldn't actually damage him. Creep. I blocked him again. He stopped coming over after he presented himself at my house, and he saw that I had a firearm. I didn't know how to use it, and I wasn't planning on using it in fairness, but it sent the point across. Me and a long-term girlfriend parted ways, pretty much mutually as the relationship had fizzled out and was even becoming toxic in its own way. So I was more than happy to be done with it. In fact, I'd been wanting to break it off for months, but I thought it would devastate her and had too much sympathy for her situation. We both moved on, and a few months down the line I started getting random numbers or private number calls in the middle of the night, where it was just silence or nonsense. Then I got a warning message from the ex saying that her current boyfriend was protective, jealous, and fiery, and was convinced she still had feelings for me and vice versa, or I was continuously trying to mess with her. That's the thing. I literally hadn't spoken to her since the breakup. One day, I decided to call the person that kept blowing me up in the middle of the night, and that was a mistake, as it fueled the dude to go into a rage. It started with long, rambling texts, Facebook messages, and voicemails. I'm pretty sure the dude was harmless, but some of the material I have saved was to the level of felony harassment, i.e. death threats. Eventually it died off and I forgot about it. Then one day, X hits me up saying she just wanted to be civil and catch up. I decide to decline as I want to avoid drama, but she insists her boyfriend trusts her now and there'll be no problems. We chat about some mundane stuff for a bit, and that was that. The next day I get a text from her number that is clearly him saying, "We knew it all along," and yeah, back to square one. Eventually I changed my number, continually blocked social media accounts until they finally broke up and it was all done. But holy hell, I'd never seen such an irrational human being and feel sorry for whatever poor girl that guy ends up with. I work night shift at Walmart. My shifts are always from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., except in the first few months of the year when they're cutting back on hours, and I sometimes start at 11 p.m. and leave at 6 a.m. Late last year, around September, when the weather was still nice outside, I went into Walmart during the day to buy some groceries. I had a few things in my basket and was walking out from the back of the store towards the self-checkout area. I noticed, out of my peripherals, that a man, probably in his mid-20s, a little taller than me and wearing a baseball cap, was approaching me from the other side of the features, those promo displays that sit in the middle of the big aisles. When he was done, he started talking to me like we were acquaintances. "I see people I know here all the time when I'm here." "Oh?" I asked, assuming he'd seen me in the morning while I was working. "Yeah, it's weird how every time I come here I see the same people all the time." He kept rephrasing himself, and I didn't really know what to say. It was pretty awkward. He kept making small talk, as I didn't stop walking to the self-checkout, and was kind of just going along with the conversation like you do when some random person is talking about the weather. Now that I look back on it, when he told me he sees the same people all the time, I thought he looked a little familiar and assumed he was a vendor and worked some mornings there, and I mistakenly mentioned I worked there and also see the same faces. Then he told me to have a nice day and I checked out and went to my car, dismissing the interaction. A lot of fellow employees greet me at Walmart when I go there during the day, so I didn't think much of it. Then it got super weird super fast. I was just leaving the parking lot, and the exiting road splits into a left-only lane and the other a straightaway. I was turning, stopped, when this white Ford Explorer pulls up next to me and beeps loudly. I was already turning, but looked in my rear view and sure enough it was the guy from earlier. I recognized his face and baseball cap. He sat at this stop, watching me pull away. Alright, a little weird, but he's probably just being friendly. When I got home, I told my boyfriend, and he immediately thought it was strange, and then said I was wrong for even engaging in conversation with this man, because sometimes some guys can get the wrong idea. My boyfriend also works with me on my shift, but his car has a blown head, so we've just been using my car to commute back and forth from work. So one nights I don't work, my car is still there if he works. Keep in mind that as employees, we aren't allowed to park close to the store. We are limiting the parking at the far end of the lot or in front of the other stores in the shopping center. I have a typical spot. I always park in front of the AT&T place, which is next to the gym, which is next to Walmart. About 2 months ago, my boyfriend said He went to walk out the car on brake and saw a white Ford Explorer parked next to it, with a guy sitting within it. When he saw my boyfriend, he left. This happened again in the same month, except my boyfriend was sitting in the car, and the white Ford Explorer drove up to Walmart, then past my boyfriend staring at him. Then last month, I was driving home from work. It was barely 7 a.m., still pretty dark outside, and I was cruising down the highway towards the exit for my town. There was a car following 2 lengths behind me. We were both doing the speed limit, nothing abnormal, and suddenly this car begins to speed up, gets in the fast lane as if to pass me, but slows down so that we are neck and neck. The driver turns on his interior lights, waves at me and then speeds off. It was the guy in the white Ford Explorer. I just stared at him bewildered. I didn't know what to think. Then it dawned on me. He knows where I work. He knows what my car looks like. It's pretty distinguishable even from the back. I have shark fins along the top, decals, mud flaps, etc. He probably was waiting for me to leave work and then followed my car when I left. Thank God he didn't follow me home, because I never would have realized it. I was totally unsuspecting when I walked out to my car alone. Now, what happened a few days ago is why I'm even sharing this. I think this is when it started to escalate. It was a typical night. Both my boyfriend and I worked along with our co-workers and friend called Mark. When Mark works, we always park next to him, so we can talk on lunch and breaks with the windows rolled down. Mark parks further away from the store, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. We finish up for the night, clock out, and Mark heads out to his car while my boyfriend and I buy some stuff to make for dinner. We check out and head to the car. Mark is still there, which is unusual for him, since he books it out of there like a bat out of hell every time his shift is up. "Hey man, did you get my text?" he calls out, smoking a cigarette. "No, let me check my phone." My boyfriend pulls out his phone and I see a pretty long unread text from Mark. Pretty much, this weird guy came out of nowhere and was touching and looking at the inside of your girlfriend's car, Mark says. My immediate thought was, some randomer likes my car enough to come up and touch it. Weird, but okay. Like he just walked up and started touching the fins and looking inside. Then when he saw me sitting there, he asked me about the decorations. I told him I didn't know anything about them, and he told me to have a nice day. We immediately started checking for damages, tires, etc., but there was nothing. We get in the car, and the 3 of us just sit there, contemplating the reasoning behind this. The Ford Explorer guy had almost slipped my mind. His encounters were a month or so apart, but then I started thinking about him again. There were 2 cars parked near us. A white 2010 Pontiac G6, and surely enough, a white Ford Explorer. Up until this point, I didn't know the make of the car he drove, but I knew it was definitely a white SUV. Mark said he came from the direction of those 2 cars, so unless he walked to Walmart at 7 a.m., one of those cars was his. The Explorer was facing the opposite direction, and I quickly wrote down the number plate. I started asking Mark what the guy looked like. "About your boyfriend's height, kind of a gangster-looking guy." Keep in mind I've only seen this guy once when he wasn't in this car, which was 4 months prior. The height sounded right, but I didn't really know. We decided to sit there and wait until this guy came out and confront him. Just as we were about to give up and leave, the guy starts walking our way out of Walmart. He was wearing a black hoodie, dark jeans, and a camo bandana. When he saw us, he put on sunglasses. Both of us looked towards Mark. "Is that the guy?" No, that's not him." Mark shook his head. The guy walks into the Explorer, sits in the driver's seat and lights a cigarette with the door open. After he closed it, I looked back at Mark. "Are you sure that's not him?" "Yeah, it's him. That's the guy," Mark nodded. Explorer guy starts his car and looped around our car, staring at us, then looped again to the exit of the parking lot. Mark said he didn't want to tell us it was the guy because he didn't want my boyfriend to lose his job. I'm pretty sure Mark would have told us If it was the guy, then some stuff would have gone down. I'm pretty positive now that this guy has been stalking me. For how long, I don't know. I'm starting to think the guy drove to Walmart. I want to assume to buy something, since he walked out with nothing. Saw my car parked next to it, then realized while he was casing my car that Mark was sitting there. So he asks Mark about the shark fins to try and make him think he was just interested in how it looked, and not being completely shady. I'm creeped the hell out, but I have his plate number. The morning before we left work, my boyfriend bought me pepper spray, and I'm now parking elsewhere, and I'm going to start asking co-workers if they'll take me to my car in the mornings when I'm alone. I don't know what I can do, or if anyone would take this seriously, because he hasn't tried anything yet. Sadly, I'm a pretty dainty girl, too brave for my own good, and I couldn't fight my way out of a wet paper bag. But I don't think this is over yet. Last night I was stocking yogurt alone at around midnight, when I hear, "Excuse me," from behind me. Thinking it was a typical customer question, I turn around while politely replying, "Yes?" When I fully turned, it took me a moment to realize who was approaching me. Stalker. I know that my facial expression probably spoke volumes about my fear for a little while, but I didn't want to alarm or upset him, so I kept calm and spoke to him like I would any other customer. "I'm not a stalker or anything," he prefaced, "but I was just wondering where you got those decorations for your car. I see it a lot and I'm curious." "I got them off eBay." Before I could finish, he interrupted me, trying to keep the conversation going. "Do you know what they're called?" "Pretty sure they're called diffusers, because they're meant to diffuse airflow on the car. I got them off eBay for $20 the whole set." "Oh, okay, thanks. Have a nice night." He smiled and walked away. What the hell? I'm not a stalker or anything. Yeah, dude, you are. I think I was in shock because there was no way I should have been that calm and nonchalant while talking to him. I know for a fact he was just trying to cover his ass, since we pretty much caught him red-handed that day. I really hope I never see him again, because he knows we're on to him. This happened to my friend Simone a while back. She got into a relationship with a guy who she adored. He constantly doted on her. He had money and came from a line of it, but that didn't make their relationship any more stable. After the honeymoon period of about 3 months, things start to go off the rails. She couldn't come hang out with the girls anymore. There was always an excuse. She was always busy. We would often go to the movies together, just us two, but even these would be cancelled, and I was her best friend. She started telling me that she didn't want to speak to me that much anymore, that her boyfriend was consuming a lot of her time. Non-stop texts, asking where she was when she was at school. It became really infuriating. She even had to quit her job as a nanny of these 2 adorable children because the guy became concerned that she may just fall in love and sleep with the husband. Really messed up stuff. After a while, I actually went round her house and spoke to her mum about it. I felt like it was the best thing to do. She wasn't in a good place. And after a good chat and staying over for dinner, crying and falling asleep together on her bed, we agree that the best course of action would be to tear off the band-aid and let this guy go. It took her about a month, but she dumped him. She finally saw how manipulative he was being and how it's not normal to try and control your partner's life. But then the stalking began. He started sending her gifts, all of which she refused. Then, following her. She got a new job working at a supermarket. She'd be followed home in her car by her ex. When she got home, he'd usually just drive on, and she began to get really annoyed. She had ceased contact with him about 3 months ago at this point, and she started messaging him again, demanding why he was still following her, that they were broken up, and that he should just get over it. He said that he still loved her, and that he would not relent until they were together again. He didn't stop saying this, and said that he needed to make sure she got home safely. It was his number one concern because he loved her, that she was his soulmate. As you can imagine, this went down really well. So well, in fact, she ended up getting a restraining order, which didn't do much until they tried to get further police involvement. At which point, he finally got the memo that perhaps it's best to let sleeping dogs lie. And that's how the story ended. But it was a very challenging year. Thankfully, Simone is now with a lovely guy. I met Carter at a convention. Right off the bat, he scared me. I heard rumors that he'd nearly been removed from the extremely liberal convention. But he seemed nice enough and lonely. So I decided to befriend him instead. Then I noticed that he was always nearby. When I was walking to my hotel, he was there. When I was eating lunch, he was there. When I was in my private group, he waited outside the door. When I went to meetings, he was there too and sat beside me. He usually either walked up to me and started a conversation, which ended in an awkward silence, or just stared at me from 50 yards away. I couldn't believe he was really following me. So I went to my hotel, disguised myself, and went outside to see if he was there. He was, literally lurking in the trees nearby. He pressured me into giving him my number, so I gave him a fake one. He found my professional information and begged me to look over his work, to which I declined. He asked me if I'd be at a party. I lied and said no. He showed up anyway. Somehow he knew I'd decided to go. He always talked about how lonely and depressed he was, and how I was a lifeline, until, on my way home from the convention, I had no service during the flight. He freaked out and spammed 49 messages until ending with, "Okay, fine, I'm gonna end myself now, just so you know," strongly implying that it was my fault for not answering him immediately. I told him to call 911 and then blocked him. He contacted me through Instagram, Hangouts, email and more, but I never replied. I asked the convention security to speak with him about his creepy behavior, and I was told to just switch off my phone. Fast forward a few months, I get an email from James asking me to look over his work. Not a big deal. I run a program specifically for this sort of thing. I agreed, since his email was very polite and well worded, but he seemed pushy in a way I couldn't quite figure out. I ignored it, reviewed his work, and ceased communication. You know where this is going. A little while later, he confessed that it was Carter all along. He put all the blame on me and apologized in a horribly manipulative way, begging me once again to review his work. I never replied, and here we are. James/Carter, let's never meet again. Just over a year ago, I split up with a very abusive ex-boyfriend, Kieran. He would be physically, verbally, and otherwise aggressive, and seemed constantly paranoid of being emasculated. This progressed to being paranoid about me even earning as much as him. I tried to be clear that I saw him as an equal, but it didn't matter. He fell further and further into the philosophy that women are the root of all evil. If ever there was a living, breathing caricature of genuine misogyny, he was it. I'm not a fighter, and he hated it. As he put it, the silence, the open void, hurts me more. He wanted me to fight back, but I never would. So, he would go to greater and greater lengths to assert dominance over me in one way or another. One incident was so extremely violent and calculated that I eventually reported it to the police, and with the help of an off-duty cop, due to the nature of the assault, it went straight to Crown Court, which is reserved for the worst offences in the UK. Nothing came of it. No eyewitnesses. It wouldn't have gone anywhere. I pressed it no further. I just wanted it marked up to help any future partners build a case that puts him away if it ever happens again. This was the incident that tipped me towards making the decision to leave Kieran. It took some months, but I eventually did it. He made so many attempts to contact me that even the officers on my case raised an eyebrow. It was getting beyond borderline harassment. Long story short, this guy was not happy that he had lost me. He didn't care about my well-being. He cared about having me. I don't think I understand why to this day. Kieran kept vying for attention. He likes women of my political persuasion, and as I was known as an outspoken activist at the time, he began name-dropping my messages to other women in the same political circles. I thought that maybe he didn't think we knew each other at first, but then he started messaging friends. I tried to be cordial with all former partners, including him, so when he messaged me asking if another activist we followed was still online, I told him she was. Big mistake. Within the hour, she DM'd me. She received aggressive messages from him demanding photos and then demanding an explanation as to why she wouldn't oblige, because Kieran was my nice ex. I quickly told all other young female activists at my university in my hometown and my local party associations. Almost all came back to me saying they had indeed received messages from him. He was hounded off Twitter by a friend's boyfriend and deleted his account. I know how that feels, and I feel bad for it, but I don't regret the act of warning my friends, especially the more vulnerable ones. But then a new account was made. Kieran Mate 97. I only noticed because the first notification I remember getting the morning after was that this account had followed me. It had a photo of Kieran and a few sunny tweets shared by my fellow followers about how he was new to Twitter and wanted some friends. I spread the warning to some people and blocked the account, but before long there was another. I did the same and blocked them too. My mother started messaging me in confusion, sending me screenshots from her own Twitter. Kieran had found her anonymous account and was asking her about beans she had bought the other day. Knowing the things Kieran had said about her to me, and possibly others, she was upset and creeped out beyond compare. I advised she blocked him and he would tire himself out eventually. But there's one thing that I need to mention. One night I was messaging friends, having a nice night in with the housemates. Then my WhatsApp pinged. All of my family are on there, as well as a few busy activist groups, so I didn't think anything of it. Because of all the activist groups too, I wasn't alarmed that it was an unsaved number that had messaged me. It was probably a colleague. I opened the message. The only thing there was a dark photo of a house with an upstairs light on. I squinted to try and see if there was a joke in the photo. Why would someone send me this? I could see a figure in the window hunched over, something small in their hand. I could see the end of the terrace, the hedges, the shape of the gate, the pebble dash, the light car out front. It was my house. I forgot my merriment and messaged my friends. The conversation completely derailed, understandably. We scrambled to figure out who sent this to me, but by the time the second picture came in, I already knew. I didn't even look at it. Most of my uni friends at the time were competitive weightlifters, and they offered their house as safe refuge until I figured out what was happening. I sent a frantic, "What are you doing?" to Kieran, and he began typing immediately. He had been waiting. "Peeking," he replied. "It was a joke. Can you see that shadow? I'm not a bloody peeping Tom. I thought it was a joke when you first scared me crapless, but now I can't make sense of it. Oh no, that was just me actually watching my neighbor's shadow eating a pot noodle for entertainment, as if I'd come for you. You know how I think better than anyone." I examined the second picture closely. It wasn't mine. It looked very much like it. He hasn't messaged me since. No communication at all. I still don't understand what the purpose of that whole exercise was. I stayed in my house and left in the early afternoon for a friend's place the next day. For months afterwards, I was very careful about letting my landlady, neighbors, and friends know I was coming home. The doors and windows are always locked. I really don't know how he thinks. I hope I never see him again. How this all began was me being nice to the people who come to my local community library. I was a casual worker, although people probably thought I was a part-timer, as not only was I spotted behind the desk checking in and out books, but also on my laptop abusing the Wi-Fi. This guy nicknamed Chesney was probably an influencer for the young adults, as he mainly skateboarded around and did whatever. He was never alone. I was a natural when it comes to customer service speaking and acting, so chances are I must have spoken to Chesney kindly enough he thought I was interested in him, or he became infatuated with me. I don't date anyone in or from my community. I explained to many people before that dating here would be full on Alabama. Chances are they could be my cousin through marriage or blood. It's disturbing as I'm Native American and can't even go west or south to date another guy, because chances are they might also be a long-distance cousin. While my time at the library was long, just to gain work experience, it did not last when Chesney asked me to hang out with him. I declined the first time, but it didn't stop. One day he asked for my phone number, and I refused. I don't give out personal information like that. I have a low friend count. I'm not close to anyone who isn't within my immediate family, and my family can see BS as soon as it comes into their line of sight. Chesney then asked my supervisor for my number to give to him. How I came to know this is by the end of the day when we were closing out the library. My supervisor tells me that she'll keep an eye on him and that I should get home safely. I continue every day as normal, very ignorant to the situation that was now starting to build. One day I was sitting in my cubbyhole, as the patrons like to call it, and I started to notice Chesney would find a spot to sit where I would be in his line of sight. I ignored this until one day he came up to my cubbyhole and hands me this Magic the Gathering card. He didn't say much, but I was disturbed. I'll be honest, something about him didn't seem right. The card had an octopus on it, and then, right then and there, I placed the card down and gather up my things and leave. I didn't return to the library for 3 months, maybe even longer than that. This had taken place 2 years ago. I told my eldest sister about the incident, and my family were worried. They wanted to know the guy's name. However, I did not want to know his name. I didn't see him being important to remember. I didn't see him again until a year later. I'm doing more casual work at the library and basically forgot his face until one day he comes in and was working at a computer. I never gave him a second thought. I was busy reorganizing and stacking the bookshelves. Then he printed off a paper and came up to me and asked, "How do you get a job here at the library?" My reply was blunt. "You'll have to speak with my supervisor." I overheard my supervisor telling him he couldn't hand him his resume here, that he needs to hand it in over at HR at the band office. Never saw him again, as I got a job elsewhere. 2 years later, about 4 days ago, I'm living my life as normal when my mum texts me. "Hey, some guy's calling you and would like to speak to you. Is there no number to call back?" Not my time. Didn't call my number. Not worth a call back, Mum. I just answered the phone. I said I'd just pass the message on. She gives me the caller ID, but like an arse, I text her back saying the ID isn't familiar and there's no number to call back from. If someone wanted to speak to me, they would call or text me through my cell. Otherwise, it can't be important. And I ignore it. I was sitting at my local Timmy's when my eldest sister calls me and tells me that I have a stalker. This shook me a bit, but another part of me was amused, since I do have a tendency to think dark thoughts, and that this could be a joke. My sister explained to me that my stalker wanted to meet with me and take me out to dinner, that he wanted to hang out with me. She wasn't saying this seriously, which is why I thought she was joking. I didn't know who this guy was, and I tried to place a name and face to whoever this person was. Things were starting to get a bit annoying when my mum and elder sister started to accuse me of giving out my brother's number to a stranger. Why the hell would I do that? I barely have a social life. Whose number would I be giving it out to? When I went home, I went over to my brother's house. My mum, who was staying there, said he just called. Now my family's on high alert. By reverse number searching, I got an address where the number was coming from. I wasn't taking this seriously. Whoever they are, they lived outside the res. Me and my elder sister went to the address and did a drive-by. My sister enlightened up the mood by making jokes, pointing out to random guys who were walking down the road saying, "Oh, that must be your stalker. No, that one." Just saying, these guys walking around the road looked like your typical druggie or tweakers. Once we returned home, my amusement ended, as the accusations started up again. If I gave out my brother's number, being the concern. My elder sister asked, and demanded to know, but of course I had not done that. "Then how did your stalker get it?" she asked. "Well, he either got it from someone who knows our brother's home phone number or looked it up in the phone book," is what I concluded, as I know for damn sure I never gave out anyone's number. Once I got home, I was annoyed, immediately grabbed my brother's handphone and went outside to call this guy. My sister was walking to my other brother, filling him in on what was going on. It didn't take long for the guy to pick up. You can guess who it was. Chesney. Chesney was the one calling my brother's home and asking for me. I immediately started to tell him my family isn't amused and that I wasn't interested. Even when I said no, he kept on trying to ask me out. So I asked for his full name, which he gave, and told my siblings who it was. It's not my fault for living under a rock. Turns out this guy's an addict, if not a loser, and I told my parents and they told me to not even think of dating him and to just go and leave him alone. Thanks, Mum and Dad. I don't date anyone from the res. I did do a Facebook search, and of course he had to be a wannabe thug, honest about doing hardcore drugs in his post, and I love that he has German blood, saying he's a Nazi and a descendant of the Führer. Nice. Getting up, I went to my brother's house, who was home, annoyed, and I couldn't find the phone on the cradle. I asked my brother, who went to the incoming calls, pressed the number and handed it to me, which I immediately pressed call, and this guy didn't wait to pick up the phone. "Chesney?" "Speaking." I was pissed and didn't use my customer service voice. That was gone. "You will cease and desist from calling this number ever again, or I will get the police involved. This is a form of harassment." Okay. I hung up, furious. My mother said something about calling the cops, but he was calling my brother's phone, not mine directly, and he hadn't done anything threatening yet. But still, I really hope not to meet that guy again. Pathetic, worthless, and annoying. I was accused of being a stalker. Did I do what I was accused of? Yes. But let me take you to how this started. I was home making dinner. The only 3 other people that were in the house were my 5-year-old son, his friend, and our foreign exchange student, Tina, who was 15 and extremely shy and didn't like talking because she didn't think she spoke English very well. I'm making dinner, as I said, and have my hands buried in a meatloaf and the phone rings. I wipe my hands and answer the phone, and some lady's yelling at me. I can't understand her. She keeps yelling, and I got the words son, police, kick, ass. She hung up, and I was standing there with the phone in my mostly wiped hand, very confused. I resumed my meatloaf when the phone rang again. It was the same lady who was a little calmer and said, "Stop calling here. My son doesn't want anything to do with you. I already called the police." And I said, "You've been calling me. I didn't call you. I don't even know who you are." "The police will contact you and throw you in jail. I hope you rot in there." I didn't know what this lady was doing or where she was getting her information from. I was making dinner, my son was playing with a friend in the next room, and Tina was studying. Later the same day, the police department called, asking if they could come over and speak with me. We set up a time and I'm almost in tears. Keep in mind I'm in my mid-30s and didn't even pull pranks when I was young. I was one who always followed the rules and taught my kids the same thing, and now I'm being accused of being a stalker? This may not seem scary, but I was terrified, thinking this lady is going to have me thrown in jail without so much as an explanation from me. Not that I had one. I was confused. 2 officers pull up and I open the door. They asked me to lock up my dogs as I had 3 Great Danes at the time, so I lock them up out back and come back to the door and tell them to come in. The kids were at the neighbor's house because I didn't want them to see me being arrested if it came to that. We sit at the kitchen table and I get them each a bottle of water with them asking about who lives here and where they are, and I'm sitting there shaking visibly. I'm so nervous, my mouth is dry and I can't swallow and I can barely speak. Just then my husband comes home. He's the one who can talk anyone calm and practically could sell oil to Saudi Arabia. He's so smooth. He's talking to the officers, and even though he wasn't here, he knows I'm not stalking anyone and that these accusations are ridiculous. They say the person said I called them and hung up. I said I was making a meatloaf and answered the phone with meatloaf residue on my hands, and some lady began yelling at me. And I only understood some police kick and ass, and she hung up. And then she called back, and I understood her better, and she said that I was going to jail and her son didn't want anything to do with me. And finally the officer says, "Well, I don't think you had anything to do with this, but she has your number, so someone called. Do you think your kids have anything to do with this?" I told him my little one was playing with a friend in the dining room, which I could see at all times, and my foreign exchange student was studying at the time, and she's quiet and there's no way she would stalk someone. Plus, I was right next to the phone. There was another phone in my bedroom and no one ever went there, so it couldn't have happened. They gave me the phone number I was supposed to have called and didn't recognize it. So they asked if they could speak to Tina, who was 15. She was shy, and I didn't really want to scare her, and they said they would just calmly speak to her, so I said okay. She came out, sat at the table with us, and they were asking her name, how she liked it there, and if she made any friends, and if she called any friends today. She said that she didn't, but then she said that she tried to call Jamie, but went over there instead but came back home because everyone was upset about someone stalking their son. We came to find out she plugged an old phone into the jack in her room, and it worked, so she called from there, and she hung up after 2 rings because she decided to walk over there since they live 4 houses away. My neighbors were getting calls from one of their son's ex-girlfriends, and Tina just happened to call at the same time, and they hit *69 and called my house thinking that I was the stalker. Now *69 was very new and I didn't know about it at the time. We had a huge laugh when the police called and told them that I was not the stalker. It was their neighbor, who they knew, and we were cool. Hey guys, it's Maud here and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you guys have enjoyed tonight's stories. Stalkers can be pretty creepy. It's just so uncomfortable to never feel safe looking behind you, to know that there could be someone watching you at this very moment. And although not all stalker stories manage to portray the fear you feel from this, I just want you to know that it is truly a terrifying sensation to have someone follow you around. It is bad. You never know what these people want to do, if they're unhinged. It's delicate. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to my wonderful patrons and my members. If you'd like more information on either of these, link is in the description. But for now, guys, it's time for me to sign off and bid ye good night. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.